Hello and welcome, each and every one of you. With you today is me, Daiga, couch therapist from DCTcentre, and joining me is Luke Harrison, architect, artist, brains and spirit behind Brain Bomb Productions, with knowledge of sacred geometry, frequencies in all creations, shamanic magic, lore craft. So lots of skills. Hello, Luke.
Blessings. Hi. Pleasure to be here.
Uh, Now I think you can start tell people about yourself a little bit to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So perhaps, before we launch on this, we've just got some kind of visual cues to go with this. I'm just hoping perhaps we're on the first slide. Um, yeah. Okay. There we go. I think that's second. That's a good point to start, actually. Um, I really wanted to just spend a moment just sharing a story. And this story is,
Excuse me, look, you can change slides yourself now.
oh,
You
fantastic.
can do with slides whatever you want.
All right. So let's have a look. So I can drive the slides from here. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want with slides.
Okay, got it. So here we go. That's the preamble. You can see that now, can't you? Yeah. This is a story of living to live in the private. Um, and so, in the interest of time, because, I know a lot of questions can sometimes form based on what gets shared in this journey. So if I was to drop ourselves into this second slide here, the story is just about an individual, like most folks who was born into the world with a birth certificate and signed up with national insurance and the bank accounts and did all of that sort of stuff and spent 24 years sort of working in public and private capacity for corporations as well as public sector, designing and delivering essentially all of the leading new technologies and platforms as an architect. Now, that was a journey in its own right. But what I found is that, through all of the labors of life and all of the challenges of, building your craft, especially a craft that may require a great deal of going into sort of zooming into a great deal of depth and detail, as well as zooming out and gaining sort of a general appreciation of the wider macro themes. This is what sort of developed and cultivated an innovative spirit through, this person who's living in the public, who's got a job, who gets paid, and over many years of the usual kind of debt slavery system, finds that he's able to break out, and he's that person who's now in that kind of top 1% earnings bracket of public. And that person then gets to, a few years ago, especially I'd say around 2018, there was a great many themes or catalysts coming up at that time. And it was a very reflective period for me and insightful. And I just thought to myself, like, what does this all really amount to? All this sort of doing, let's say, great things. I'm very proud of all of the things that I did in that slave-based system. And I'm using those words deliberately right now. But there are.
Try not to use too many times
Yes. Oh, sorry, the slide.
because I don't know how so many times will be YouTube reacting on this. So
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this really just captures the preamble into the journey really as well. I'm kind of looking at where it all stacks up to, and I think what we could do. In fact, let me jump into this one here because we've actually only got 5 left really. So I'm thinking about what does it really stack up to be. I ended up being an individual building a lot of infrastructures, literally billions and billions of pounds of infrastructures for all kinds of technology leaders out there and companies. I was responsible for building out probably one of the largest leading architectural teams across the globe. And we basically connected every single application, every single device on every part of the planet together in the most optimal way. And we helped every network service provider, cloud service provider, mobile operator, and so forth to sort of optimize their whole game plan in that process. So, I thought, well, look, everything that I'm earning, and, as time goes by and it goes up, you're seeing 50% of what your earnings go, immediately it's taken away in tax. Now, I was one of those individuals who ended up being a witness to the evidence that was submitted under Article 61. And this is when the Barons Committee submitted the evidence that the Queen had been usurped and that basically anybody in head of office or government or, any of that lineage are part of a treasonous and criminal operation, until it's processed. And it means that the general public, under Article 61, are guided by these old laws of what happens when this event occurs, is that they should abstain and withdraw themselves essentially from that office, and they shouldn't be, say, paying things like taxes. Now, taxes is actually a relatively new concept as it happens. It only goes back a few hundred years, really. There's been other different forms, but taxes is relatively new in the game plan. But I look at all of this, and there I am witness to certain evidence, and I'm placing a number of these organisations, your council, your local COPS, which is also a registered corporation, your local magistrates, that's also a corporation. You can look them all up for Dunn's number and so forth. And so I sent all of those notices, and at that stage I'm like, I'm clear about what I should be doing going forward. I need to stop being a PAYE or inside IR35 contract type of a consultant in my kind of a business. And there's so many businesses, even whether you're doing dentistry, whether you're doing GP practice, whether you're there's a million different types of roles out there that you can actually go private. So learning to live in the private applies to those who want to run their business, but without the mandates that you've got to do it with masks, you've got to separate your people, you've got to do this, and comply with the certification, where your customers aren't actually paying for that certification policy or compliance, they're actually paying for the service. So with a private person, it's about going private. And there are some very simple procedures where you can set yourself up, with the registered, whether it's PayStream or services like this, and basically have a registered corporation and be a private consultant and basically earn legitimately without having to make any, let's say, legitimate challenge against those tax contributions of up to 85%. And this is a big deal. This is a big deal in terms of dealing with the machinery when let's say the nature of the criminal and what you're up against, I suppose, as an everyday person just trying to make their way in life, look after the family and do those sorts of things. Now, that's a part of me that faced the public world and did that kind of work and did those kinds of creations and innovations. But I've kind of hung my hat at the end of last year on that side of the world. And I'm entering the world where I will continue to run things like some of the technology startups. I will continue to act as a person in essentially public. As soon as I have a corporation that is registered, that's registered in the public. As soon as I am attaching a name like with my status, like a Mr., a doctor, a professor, or whatever, with my name, Luke Harrison, I'm attaching the legal fiction or person status to that person. The person status actually becomes a beneficiary of a trust. And the part of pivoting to lawfulness is creating kind of accounts and registrations in a compound fact state name, or in your own kind of, let's say, living private, living being name. This is where you move from signatures to autographs. And so the balancing act now becomes how you do your paperwork. And so there's a time of investment where you have to kind of do some new paperwork in new language to remedy all of the old paperwork. But there are a number of processes for doing this and basically correcting things. And you can kind of do it one at a time. So just to go into my journey, I'm just going to flip back to where I am on this. Okay, so I'm going to go into this next slide here. I was just saying, summing it up, I was doing 12-hour working days. And even though I was doing 12-hour working days, I was still finding time to, produce productions, contribute to publications and other sort of PR sort of stuff that occurs. And looking after folks. Now, in all of that, that's very sort of time challenging.
Maybe you can do it like slideshow, because at the moment it's very small.
Yeah, got it. Let's do this. How's that?
Yes, that's much better.
Okay. Yeah, the text is getting a little small. So don't worry about the text here.
I can't read, so that means our viewers won't be able to read either. So
that's okay. Well, look, the viewers don't have to worry about getting the text. It's kind of, some of this information can be wrapped up for later on, just because there's some key areas and points that you might think, oh, what was that again? I might want to check that up later on. So don't worry if you can't see it on this presentation. I'll just throw it up there just to sort of, be where I'm at sort of discussing. So yeah, I'm kind of summing up, there's some points here that I'm saying, despite living in the top 1%, what does it really all add up to? I'm only accessing 50% of that income. That other 50% is going on things that I'm not voting for, I'm not interested in, I don't value. You know, I've had the experience myself of putting children through the schooling system and their isolation techniques for children that have questions. It is a diabolical sort of a state of affairs. Our roads are completely potholed and destroyed. Most people are investing in charities in their own time to fix all of the gaps and holes of everything that's not actually being properly funded. So it's very clear to me what's going on, and you know, what needs to be done, I suppose, to start pivoting out of that. So I'm going to move on to the next slide quickly. Is that all right?
Do it whatever you want to do it. So it's your
All right.
time.
Yeah, so I've kind of touched on this. So there is some text here saying that my journey started with Article 61. I just wanted to mention that because in a way that was a pivot point. You know, when you're witness to that body of evidence or whatever it might be, it's like that's the door that you kind of, if you give it credence, you don't walk back through it. So, you know, at that point, you know,
maybe explain to those viewers who don't know Article 65 what it actually is.
Well, Article 61 is about what you do when Queen or head of state has been usurped or is involved or engaged in criminal activity, and certainly treason. That's the highest of the offences of which they're implicated. So Article 61 is the remedy. It's a remedy for the people to basically reclaim their buildings. So this is their council offices. They have to place on notice. So it's a very peaceful process where you place key parts of the infrastructure on notice of your standing, that you are a witness to the evidence. You supply them all of that evidence as well. So they are now a witness. Whatever their responses are, if it's I don't understand, I can't see, you know, I don't, you know, that sort of stuff, then quite often your notices will include a response with thank you for your response or your seditious reply. It's been recorded and will be used in, you know, practices of follow-ups later on. You're placing people on notice. If you're in evidence of, you know, or witness of evidence of an issue, and they have been presented that information and they make their position clear based on that interaction, that you're part of that process of notification and being a witness. But all of this is kind of paperwork exercise. So all of a sudden, we've got to figure out how we get extra organized on doing a bunch of paperwork. So that's what it was like, you know, getting prepared for that side of things. What followed, and hopefully that's you know, because I didn't want to give too much time to Article 61. I just wanted to say, for me, that was my entry point, and that's really, largely speaking, that's what it's about. Because it's one of the old and ancient laws, and it was the, you know, includes the whole remedy for holding a constitution and keeping it alive and against attack and things that it's witnessed over and over again in history. Is it's always being attacked and contested. So there are always people that say, oh, well, there was this act or bill or article that came out later on that did away with your basic unalienable freedoms and rights. And it's like, well, no, that's fraudulent criminal activity. Just because they managed to get it passed in some last minute bill, or they hacked the system or overloaded it or whatever they did to make that happen, doesn't make it a constitutional act and one that people have to follow, you know. And this all bears down to the simple notion: pivoting out of this system or this, let's say, the prison slavery debt system, is about contractual law. Once you're actually familiar with contractual law, you realize that in most cases, none of these entities actually have a valid legal contract with you, and you can actually challenge it. So you can actually challenge it within their own legal system and infrastructure on a legal basis, without having to say, I'm now a witness to this and I'm standing in common law and going down that path. So that's what I measured up. You know, there's organizations like Common Law Court and, you know, all the rest of that. But looking at that system, there's still kind of a register to this other entity as part of that process, which is not that dissimilar from the issues in the current system. So lawful standing and sovereignty is about, to a degree, just learning a little bit on the contract law, learning about dividing yourself into two parts. What should be obvious and is obvious to everyone isn't actually obvious in the system we're in. And what I mean by this is the living human being is not separated out jurisdictionally from the legal fiction, the person with a title, Mr., Mrs., and the name that follows.
1 minute, look, we at the moment have 2 viewers, And please, I want to tell our viewers, please ask questions if you don't understand something what Luke is saying, or you came on late and you don't know what is going on. Please ask questions and I will ask your questions to Luke, and that way we will all be clear about what is going on today.
Yeah.
Okay, Luke, sorry, I little
No,
bit get
not
in
at
there.
all. You know, we've got let's see how much time we've got left. So we're 20 minutes in. I'm thinking questions are really valuable, especially if there's areas or topics that, you know, it might be a topic for, let's pick this up later on, and because we might need to give a section 15 minutes, say, just to sort of maybe even look at the pros and cons of a particular process, for example, because there are lots of arrangements. My whole life has been around evaluating and researching lots of different, let's say, arrangements and compositions of things, whether it's an entire business or, you know, a composition of music. You're bringing together a great many different parts, and you're compiling them and compositing them in a certain type of order. So for me, this whole process of learning to live in the private, and why I'm learning to live in the private, is a process where I'm taking particular challenges on at particular times. So the route that I took is I did look at what, you know, is contained in common law court system. And there are merits with this system, but ultimately I decided to go a different path. I needed a bit more time, because it takes a bit of time to appreciate each subject, to then sort of cultivate a more well-rounded view. So as I'm building a well-rounded view, I'm interviewing, you know, all like I always do in industry. Who are the top movers and shakers in this space? Interview them all. Hone in on your good questions. Get the process down. Get the effectiveness or efficiency, pros and cons, you know, the energy, you know, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? Those sorts of things worked out. And I did a lot of that work working with people like the People's Lawyer, you know, where you're kind of working the legal system, quite often with conditional acceptance, which is part of the notice process, around GDPR. This is where you're saying, you know, actually, can you claim there's an actual signed, authorized contract relating to your request? And actually, are you a valid data processor, originator of my information? That could be on a parking ticket, where parking ticket company have made arrangements with the landlord to go there and deliver their service. Then they go notify you because they're hitting your number plate, but actually, where's your signed authentication to say it's okay for you to use my data? So, you know, people need to learn those things, that they can actually challenge everything, that a notice is an invitation. That's just an invitation. You don't have to consent. And the best way to not consent in commerce is with conditional acceptance. And invoking some powers of GDPR is another way of actually calling out their illicit and illegal practices, which you will discover. My daughter had a parking charge notice that she contested. I said, look, are they even a liquid company? And they weren't. They weren't even a liquid company on Companies House. They were a bus company. And they're still going out there charging people. So, you know, we are dealing with a criminal infrastructure, massive criminal infrastructure. If you know there's no real contract and there's actually no claim, and you know how to defend it, it's about knowing how to defend it at each stage. The letter process stage, the random tool people that they may try and send to your door and make a claim. This is where you place a notice on the front. You create a boundary, a jurisdictional boundary. They're on notice. They now know that if they haven't got an appointment, they will get charges, and they need to prove how you build your boundary between you and just the outside world that thinks it can just come in and out of your door and do whatever it likes, and you've got no rights as a legal fiction or person. And that's somewhat true. As a legal fictional person, you have very limited, you have privileges as a beneficiary of a trust. So you don't actually use rights of a living human being. That's the problem. And to invoke those rights of the living human being, you have to do division and separation. So if I could touch on this subject, just to give people something to think about the whole journey. And then maybe out of that, everyone can just throw in, wouldn't mind looking more at that subject or this subject, because this is a journey. You know, everyone could follow a similar pattern, a different pattern. Who knows how it's going to come to people? But living in private was about looking at a number of things. For example, I realized how, you know, for example, you know, the elites out there are able to, who was that? So Peter Green or something like that was absolutely untouchable, even though he had the entire IRS, HMRC infrastructure on him because he had every property, every asset wrapped up in trust.
Evergreen, I think.
Yes.
Evergreen.
Yeah. Sir Dave Green. So it's funny what these sirs get up to. They wipe off billions of pounds of other people's pensions and assets after their whole life contribution. So, you know, unrecoverable because they're using trust law. Now, the problem with everyday folks is they have their land registered property that actually goes under Crown copyright, which actually is infiltratable by bills, acts and statutes if you don't know how to protect yourself against them, where, you know, somebody could declare a certain type of pandemic and then reclassify your property as something else, and that's how they could sweep up all your properties. Equally, the combat against the bills, acts, statutes type of a weaponry against we the people, the ways to go against that is to apply security by lien against these ministers, against their properties, to indemnify yourself against any damages that they are responsible for with their bills, acts and statutes against you as a living human being. That's one way that you can actually put things right. It makes it very hard. They won't be able to sell their property with the lien on it without clearing the lien. That's how it works. So they won't be able to liquidate anything. And if they do liquidate things, they'll have to resolve the lien. So there's things to consider in that process as well about, you know, they may be looking to get your property. What can you do? You could wrap it up in a trust. There's lots of different trusts for lots of different things. You can put properties in a trust. You can put your bank cards, your assets into a trust, your cars even into a trust. If you don't want to register it with the DVLA, the best way to do it is probably have it in a trust. That way you're not actually, you know, you're not under their guidance, let's say, in their legislation. That's another topic in its own right. Okay, so just sort of point a note.
Excuse me, do you want to tell me that I actually don't have to register at DVLA? I can register my car somewhere else?
Most of us have already registered with the DVLA. So my car is currently registered with the DVLA. So I'm going in a certain sequence and order. For me, the most important thing is prevent, reduce and stop paying massive tax contributions, because I'm owed millions by the government because the Treasonous Act is dated back in March 31st of 2001. So we're all owed a lot of money here. But that's not going to get recovered anytime soon. Maybe as part of Nasara Gasol, we'll see. Now, I didn't want to get into that as a subject on this particular call, but that is also a consideration about the general macro themes in the world that are occurring that needs some sort of planning against. So yeah, just to know that one way to protect your family home and your assets today is to invest a little bit or a lot, you know, a living trust or a trust vehicle that can completely bulletproof protect your asset, and you can't be means tested, and there's a whole load of things that go with this stuff. Could be, you know, anywhere from hundreds to thousands of pounds to set the trust up, and then you can put multiple properties in and out, and then it's just incremental costs involved. But just to know that that is something that is there, that could make sense, especially if the risk, like certain, let's say, bills, acts and statutes are being passed, it's clearly part of the weaponry to go and gain control over, seize control over the person's assets. Then these are the sorts of things that you can do to become very much last in line with that. There's other things that I've gone down the path of doing as well. So again, you know, I just wanted to touch on security by lien to say that separate set of kind of paperwork, but it has its own kind of format and drafting and submission process. Just to know that, and there's, you know, security, I think there's sites out there called, you know, security by lien that you might find on Telegram, Facebook, or, you know, that sort of stuff. Just like, you know, finding out about trust law is about deciding what you want to do, and then finding out what's achievable, a little bit about what's achievable, then find out what you want to do, and then find somebody who can supply the service. Just to let you know, I work through, you know, there's a lot of, let's say, wills and estates type lawyers and solicitors out there. They probably won't help you with the type of bulletproof property trust law. You'll need to find somebody who specializes, who's aware in the market of how to get certain partners to deliver that type of a product, service, or back to the client. And that's why it can be, you know, a few £1,000s for doing that. The security by lien there's no cost. It's just you doing certain types of paperwork in a certain type of way against people that are basically pushing the buttons or responsible or acting in their person, or even as their living person, just to let you know that some of these ministers are aware of how to represent themselves as a living person, also about the legal fiction. Many aren't as well. So as part of this journey, I'm now bumping into old friends that I've done work with, like when I was building all the BBC's infrastructure for them, and knowing what they are now, and not doing the TV license now, but I built all of their infrastructure and technology for getting into and through 2012 and beyond. I met some old colleagues from those days who are leading a lot of the Guardian 300, doing a lot of the presentations and talks. So we've had a chance to hang out together, you know, work together on this, and you know, kind of follow up, because the Guardian 300 movement is really good for giving people in, you know, it's operating all up and down the country where, you know, 30 people, 50 people maximum, generally speaking, just gather in a cafe, a hall, or a place, and they'll spend a day on this topic about becoming a peace constable. And a peace constable is actually understanding, you know, the actual challenges of the policy officer or the police enforcer who's actually representing the entity and not the people. So how to manage that process, should they attend a bailiff, and how to manage the bailiff. Once you're able to manage both of those entities in any number of themes and settings, and it really only takes a day to get the process started and then to come back a little bit, get comfortable, you know, do some role play. You're in a position, especially when you know you're standing both lawfully and legally, and the tricks that they're playing and how to assert them, then applying those techniques basically is pretty much completion. You know, you can then face all parts of the machinery, the letters, notice the communication from themselves, their instruments that will try and say, I've got this, I've got that. You can challenge them, you know, on basics. You know, for example, someone may say, oh, you know, I've got, there's this parking charge fine. I'm a bailiff, and they sold your debt to me. They don't tell you this, but, you know, they sold your debt to me, and so I'm here to, you know, get it back and to convince you. This is the words liability are used. Liability means ability to be lied to. This is Black Law's Dictionary. If we look at Black Law's Dictionary, this is what the whole legal world works on. I've worked with experts in the legal world as well as the lawful. They're different camps. But, you know, Black Law's Dictionary deals with the legal fiction and the person only. It doesn't mention once the living human being, doesn't deal with the living human being. So,
where do you actually see this dictionary?
So it's there are various prices and there are various copies. The hardest copies to get hold of are the ones that have been less infiltrated and edited. Anything that's been, whenever you've got things like, you know, these endless Bibles that have been edited and updated, it's the same thing for these legal, they're like, oh, we're constantly updating them because it's part of them adding the trickery into the whole machinery of the legal system. But if you can go back to the 5th edition, then all the better. But an 8th edition will service you well. You have to do a little bit of looking around, and it's only now, not everybody has to go in and look at everything that's contained in Black Law's Dictionary. It's a big topic. What I've done is I've interviewed the people that have worked with it deeply and understand it deeply, reviewed it, and also have kind of come the other side where they understand the difference between a living human being and lawful, and all this statutory stuff, which is the creation of man, making legislation, and legal, which is a Babylonian language. So, yeah. So there's, it's about creating your boundary and your jurisdiction, you know, between your living human beingness and your person. And what I wanted to touch on, so let me check on time. We're on 15:35 because I haven't really talked about all the other subjects.
We at the moment can start, I think, other subjects because we don't have live views at this point.
Okay.
And right, we can start change subjects.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'm at Guardian 300, Lawyers of Light. You know, they're groups that are also reviewing a lot of, let's say, the legislation system, and helping, you know, where there's been all these Bill of Rights acts and you know, new systems and legislation that's trying to basically usurp the people. So they will sort of do the whole review, and then they'll provide help with guidance on templates and responses for just general people that want to participate in that system. And connecting consciousness is, I want to give a shout out to that group, because even though my Article 61 journey started long before connected consciousness, connected consciousness was such a relevant kind of connection step in terms of meeting certain like-minded folks, and kind of also, just branching out further into the many directions that I've taken over the years. So what I wanted to say on that kind of journey is, just to kind of finish where I'm at now. For me, the motivation was to reduce just giving tax over to criminals. That was really important, because I could see how it's been weaponized against the family and other families. So that's the first thing. And also, don't actually, let's say, have or any clear contract or value for the services, whether it's, be it council tax, their schooling service, their healthcare service, or any of those services that apparently these, tax contributions are supposedly.
Have you actually managed to reduce or actually stop this taxes paying?
Yes, I've basically stopped the let's say the income tax and the council tax. That's where I'm at with that. The next thing for me is to create the legal jurisdiction. And so this week I'm submitting what it's called is part of the new. This is part of the new Federal Postal Court Command and Council. Okay, they hold the whole world title for flag. This is the Postmaster Direct type office. This is a completely new operation. They are invoking and replacing the entire postal service system. The postal service system is the highest supreme court of all. Why? Because it governs, controls, and records as a court of record every asset that is sent from every port, every postal lane, every service. Whether it's you're getting a delivery from UPU, DPD, Royal Mail, doesn't matter. All of them are using the postal lane service, the postal system, the ports, all of that. So they instruct on the new language for new contracts about how to construct a positive contract. And also the first thing to be done in that process, relatively straightforward, is actually to produce for the first time in your life an actual identification document. And this identification document will have your thumbprints and witness thumbprints and compound fact name as your autograph. I'll talk about compound fact name in a bit, but they'll have your thumbprints all over it. They'll have your DNA, whether it's hair or blood, actually on this document. And there's a particular process. And you're using the postal service, and you're applying a £1 stamp on, you're striking it out, and you're doing this process. Once you've got this document back, it's your ID document. You laminate that up, and you can copy it as many times as you forward on public notary services or electoral roll services to instruct them and to correct the previous contracts that was on the assumption that everything was okay with your legal person and fiction. Then you get registered with your compound fact statement name, which is the correct form of your name. You just take whatever's on your birth certificate and you just put your name, but you connect your first and your middle names with a hyphen. And then you put a space and a semicolon before your surname. That's it. Once you've got that, you've made that separation and legal jurisdiction between your living createdness. This is also the correct system, as far as I've determined to date anyway, for correcting. So if you want access, if you want to actually deliver yourself as a vessel anywhere in the world, and I don't think there's any charges, and I'll get into that for a reason, you use this. You don't need a passport. You just basically build your contract, which instructs that postal lane port system. And this is completely the direct level of the whole postal system.
Have you already have this done for yourself?
This is as far as I've got this week, as in I've got what's called a claim of life document. That's the first piece. And then the thing for me that's really important is that this is an event-driven thing where you produce your documentation, but it's only on a specific date. It's almost like an astrological portal opens up, because the request that I'm talking about that was high up in my priority order, things to get done that count, is reduce taxes, claim back birth certificate trust, So this is the method.
Have you managed to do that?
Well, I'm in that process where the first portal this year to do this is the 1st of April. And then there will be another portal. I have no idea whether it's a week, months. I have absolutely no idea when the next portal is.
How do you know the first portal is 1st of April?
So because I'm signed up, I'm part of the kind of like the Federal Postal Court Service. I'm signed up with the UK Postal Court UPU number and support system. That's the Blue Thumb Club. So they do conveyances, contracting, and that type of legal work. So I get the certificates, the templates, and the quantum grammar syntax so that I can look at it and understand how to form a positive, constructive contract. Let me give you an example very quickly. You know, there's a lot of people that are going to look at this and go, well, what the hell is he talking about? I've got lots of contracts. They're fine. I'm going to give you an example of legalese and how it's in our language. The word information is an example where in actually equates, whether it's dementia or numerically, to a no, an inflection, a no, which is a 0. So a 0, if you, in mathematically speaking, if you place a 0 next to anything, you know, whether you're, you know, if you're adding nothing to it, it kind of cancels it out, especially if you're multiplying. But things are concatenated in a way. So it kind of zeroes out or nullifies the statement or the whole sentence. So in our language is all this negative, like no, so no formation, you know, in contract is actually no contract, you know, to use that terminology. So there's a way of striking out more affirmative, positive language. It's a new way of conveyance. It's going to be a training exercise, just like with Guardians 300, just like with, you know, retraining all the magistrates, retraining the police force, which has been going on in the last year, and putting all of the schools on notice, which has been going on in the last year. This is a massive exercise. There's thousands of people involved in this process. There's a lot to orchestrate and do, and everybody's an individual, either leader, contributor, or whatever. But you know, for me, the important thing was, yeah, to get to that point. And there's an opportunity that's presented itself recently. It's taken a long time to find the system that I think will, and the right time as well, to actually do something like accessing your birth certificate fund is different to, you know, dealing with the banks, is different to blowing off the mortgage, is different to, they've all got a different timeline, a different amount of paperwork, and kind of different pros and cons to each process. But again, most of them can just be done on basically calling them out on the legal fraud that they have committed. It's actually relatively straightforward. You've just got to know what the fraud is, how to call them out on it, and how to get the Information Commissioner's Office on your side when you're doing it. So that way you can add weight to your claim, legally speaking. So I kind of wanted to use, at this point in time, I know we're now on the 43. So and I've got this kind of backdrop.
We are 38, actually. We started late.
Okay.
We are 38 at the moment.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you.
We still have more than 10 minutes, so 12 minutes. So
that's great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out on the work that I'm doing on Blue Thumb Club, because I'm not here to sell any one way or thing. I'm just saying that's what I'm doing. This is my experience. I made my own choices about what was most impactful. I believe gaining a few million out of the family for the birth certificate trust fraud is worth doing. I do believe that this year, starting the process of dealing with the mortgage fraud is worth doing. I'm, getting to a point where I'm no longer contributing to the criminal enterprise by, abstaining and having a mechanism or a method or approach for, removing contributions to tax. So these are all important things in this type of, let's say, timeline or challenge or war that we're facing. Yeah. So I will continue actually with some of the other, I will probably use some of the travel arrangements. I might change driving license. I may be adding my car to the trust and applying that a bit later on. I just want to get the important things out of the way, because each thing needs time and attention. About when you issue your communications, you're going to have timed events where you're going to then follow up, like 7 days, 30 days, things like this. Yeah. So what you want to do is know that it's probably best not to throw everything all together. Give yourself a little bit of time and space to breathe in between each approach, and to sort of gently, or as gently as you can, navigate your way. And it's at that point that I wanted to say that in the background, I've been talking about a story of an individual who was out there living in public, doing what everybody else is doing, then kind of, for whatever reason, waking up into this new state, then going into endless research and finding a way of navigating what is a deeply involved subject. But unfortunately, that was my whole background, prepped me for doing that type of a thing. No matter how vast the system is, for me, there are the processes that basically improve the efficiency of getting that done. You know, getting a complex view and bringing it down to a simple thing. You know, whole background of my world is about having, you know, very massive businesses with problems across, whether it's operational, contractual, delivery, cost, revenue, finance, whatever it is. They are all different things that have a different, let's say, they root into different parts of the problem and infrastructure at different points. And you find that all these things can sometimes cascade to one action and one investment or one thing to do that remedies the whole thing. So, you know, for me, that's the way I think. And I like to I like to do the work up front and then do that one action that I think will be applied, that then will be the way of, you know, dealing with everything else afterwards. And that's kind of sits behind my particular choices. But I also feel I've also been doing a lot of meditation work. I've many years.
1 minute, look, I want to remind everybody to please ask questions. If you have questions, please ask questions about the subject, and Luke will answer to those questions. Yeah. Okay, now we can change for next one subject.
There we go. Well, you know, it's really sort of observing, you know, going through this process of letting go of an old, let's say, self. There's some, what's the word? You know, you might mourn letting go of some aspects of your old self.
I'm at the moment, look, in that place. You already know from our meetings. I at the moment exactly in that place when I'm mourning my old self, and
Right.
I'm absolutely scared like hell because I'm first time in my life on God's payroll. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Unnerving, isn't it? It's an act of faith.
very nerving at the moment.
Yeah.
Let go and trust the funds will come at the time when it's needed. So
yeah, I think we have to really face our fears. Every time our fears are coming up, we have to figure out better and better ways of replacing that negative feeling with a positive image of sense of how you would like your future to be. You know, you can go, you know, just develop that sort of restamping process. And I think as the more we do that, the more we catalyze and transmute that negative fear. And I think that's when we somehow can relax the mind, and the ego, the huga of the body can relax with the process. It takes time and training because we're often up against our, shamanically speaking, we were recently discussing this, in fact, last night, about the sevenfold man. You know, sevenfold man as in 7 bodies of mankind. You know, there's 7 days in the week, 7 gods. In terms of that, or deities that are connected with each of those days, as an example. And it's a system that, you know, where we were discussing, you know, the process of why the huga, the body, the ego or personality has been in this process sloughed off or let go, and how the 6 parts of the other body continue outside in a different kind of, let's say, existence, life, dimensionality, and so forth. But our lives are very much driven by the, you know, the ego says, I want to be in charge. I want to be in control. I've got to have all the answers. I've got to have it all written down. I've got to have a project plan for that. I've got to have all these facts, material and manifest for me to believe in it. It kind of tries to do those sorts of things. It hasn't yet learned the merits of trusting a bit of input from the spirit or the other aspects of yourself. So I've been spending a lot of time getting really anchored, balancing breathing techniques and meditation, not just in the shamanic work, which is really helpful as well. There are breathing techniques, there's sonics and sounds that you project into the gap, into the space, to basically help you utilize or enter a certain type of trance state. And that trance state or resonation that invokes that trance state places you what we call somewhere in the tree. It could be somewhere up the tree, it could be somewhere down the tree. If you look at the tree, it's a bit of a mirror image of itself, where the roots below, so above, so below, and all that sort of stuff. But they're treated like 7 realms and another 2, almost like poles, giving kind of the 9-world tree. But which is interesting because again we've got that 7 connection with the 7-fold man as well, and 7 spaces to inhabit, to take office with. So what I'm saying is the clearing down process for me has become a big thing. You know, I'm a man who's in his 40s, looking after a family, looking after lots of friends in lots of kind of need at this stage. I want to carry on being that person, but I'm having to change everything that I've done. You know, I've not only just let go of a kind of a leading role in the public. I'm looking to do, the same in the short term. But ultimately, my heart, my spirit is with a humanitarian focus to really get started with the rebuilding of society, which means how to basically invoke a philosophy of growth, opportunity, abundance, cultivation of bettering all of ourselves, to acknowledge kind of darkness, to not be scared of darkness, to face it, to challenge it, to do all of that sort of stuff. Whether you're doing it shamanically, whether you're doing it through yoga, whether you're doing it through meditation, whatever it is, doesn't matter. But for me, meditation was super important. It changed. The more you do it, it's like you pass that 100 meditation mark, see what happens. A lot of people say the same thing, that they had no idea where they'd end up, and they truly ended up somewhere that they're so much happier with. Because when you're balancing, you're coming closer to your whole self, not just your personality that tells you how you are, what you want. You are your patterns. You say these things. That's what your personality wants you to believe you are. You're so much more than that. And it's actually bringing that back into your whole body. So actually bringing that acceptance back into your ego mind as well, and your personality, to say, building a relationship, allowing it to back off, allowing yourself to then be more guided by your whole body self. That's a recommendation. This is an earth ascension. I think the new geometry and energetic space. This is where sacred geometry, astrology, long connection with that. That's in the starcraft and lawcraft part of our shamanic practices. But for me, looking at the general vibration, the geometry is like, if you've got major star is a massive sentient being, huge love and light. If that's not already obvious, but you can look at them as setting up, triangles, squares, all kinds of shapes, as a relation or a relational shape, and that sets up a relational field. And that field governs, processes of gravity, life force, a whole load of things that emanate in the manifest. But my recommendation is that to attend to what I think is occurring, is to recognize that no matter how much darkness that you may see or be seeing, just know that that means that you're ready to transmute this. There is a solution to every problem out there. Mark my words. The ascension is the most positive direction perceivable for those willing to try. Keep creating your space and your place in that new kind of, how would you like things to be? I don't want to be the person who is doing endless paperwork to make a claim that should be obvious. But I know that we're in a system that needs a bit of a separation, or a bit of a divorce, a bit of a testament, almost like, there's one thing feeling something and communicating it, but then to write it down and make a statement and for the record is another part of sealing that process. It's an invocation. Think of it, these are all magical processes, and your contract, your verb, your word, everything can move into a new space, new quantum space, space of unity, support, and abundance. The more we're starting to feel like this, think like this, the more we're becoming balanced. Balance is about, we can't just eat a crap diet and then think we can just do a bit of yoga and that's going to get us there. Oh, it's such a hard journey. It's rewarding, but it is a tough journey, because you are literally balancing everything from food to way of life to, thought toxins to you name it. It's a massive process of alchemy. It is absolutely doable, absolutely achievable. You can just pick up a new habit each day. Oh, I'm doing this for, negative thought alchemy. I'm doing this for improving what I'm drinking or eating, or it's not for me to lecture. I'm just saying this is what I've done to get through, I think, a really difficult process where, if you're going to take on the full potential in this ascension process, then I think you'll look to your spiritual ascension. You'll look to your practices around balancing out and being kind to yourself, and knowing that we're all people that have suffered trauma and challenge and need to heal that as part of that balancing process, as well as think about the right kind of challenges and actions and to tackle to make your claim in your new world. And this is an inward, and right now it's still an outward journey. It's both. I have faith where many of us are going to arrive there in time. So that's all I really wanted to cover on that. So oh, sorry, I should have actually had this last slide up when I was kind of going through the last few minutes. I was really trying to seal all these practices, these meditations. There's a number of, I've applied the same research techniques, into, that balance, whole body creation, whether it's the pharaonic science, whether it's shamanic sciences. There's all kinds of different modalities and technologies, techniques, and they all have, let's say, the validity, their strengths. But for me, sovereignty actually lands me right in the middle here with the light body, and that's part of the ascension path that is chosen. I've mentioned here doing Naima. Naima is the single lifetime path. It's the action, the doing, the practice. It's not the academic many lifetime, keep incarnating, keep reading the many arts and scripts and so forth. It's a practice, and it aids the body, the transmutation of the carbon body into the crystalline body, light body, which is a vehicle for a new experience, as is the quantum grammar syntax, as is all of this. That's how we're breaking out of one domain and into the next. It is the gateway. That was really my finishing note. I think we're doing good on time, and I've got to probably wrap up there and go pick up my boy.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think there was lots of knowledge, and I think you will be back on my show another time to actually go deep in everything, because lots of things what you're doing is left untouched at this point.
Yeah.
So I think here is the right time where we can finish. We don't have any questions. And is there anything else you want to tell to our viewers, Luke?
Just love thyself and know thyself, and blessings with you all. It's I hope there are some folks that take something from the sharing, and in whatever time space that may be.
Everybody who is watching this show later, please send me questions, and I will ask those questions to Luke, and Luke will be back on my show again to be getting deep in everything what he does, because he just didn't touch everything yet. So thank you very much for watching. If you like my shows, please share, like, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. There is many more information shows and videos like this to come. So thank you very much from my heart to yours. God bless.